June is a particularly busy time at the allotment or in the garden with planting out and all the other things that go along with it. In this video I'm going to show you what's going on at the moment at the beginning of June, and show you, even though with the allotment of my size, which you'll know from previous videos is a fairly decent size allotment, there are potential issues with space, because when you start to plant things out, some of the plants and vegetables take up quite a lot of space. So it doesn't matter whether you've got a large allotment or garden or a small allotment or garden, there's always going to be issues in terms of space. So I'll take you around the allotment, show you some of the things I'm doing. I'll take you inside the new poly house, show you what's going on there. And that's been a real game changer this year, the poly house. It's really allowed me to grow things much better than I have done in the past because of the space I've got available. And I'll show you some of the things that I've planted out, which I started off in the poly house as well, and also some of the things that are in there which are ready for planting out now. So I'll turn the camera around and show you around the allotment and show you the types of things I'm doing now and what I'm planning over the next few weeks. Also, what I've decided to do on the channel is change the style slightly to make them more vlogs, i.e. video diaries or video logs. What I've been doing so far is publishing mainly factual videos, so how to do certain things, which I'm still going to do, but I find that a lot of the comments that I'm getting from the viewers on the channel like the videos where I'm showing people around, showing what I'm doing and giving hints and tips as I go around. So that's going to be the style of the content from now onwards. So this is me standing at the entrance of the allotment, the entrance gates behind me. You can see the new poly house in front of you. It's starting to really become exceptionally useful now with the types of things I've got in there, and I will show you in there at the end of the video. These paths need tidying up, because anybody who's got allotment or a garden will know that for some reason the weeds don't really have a problem growing very fast, and we have to keep on top of them, but that's a job for next couple of days. So at the back of the allotment here I've got my blackberries. You can see that just flowering now. That's going to climb up the cage, and behind that I've got broad beans. Now they've really taken off in the last say month. They were very slow. I actually planted these in November, and I was expecting that, that they were going to be disappointing this year, because this area was used heavily when we built the poly house, and there was some damage to some of them, so I had to transplant a few, but they look great now. I might have to put some canes up some of the taller ones. They've already got the flowers on, so I should get a decent crop of broad beans off them. And the great thing is that this variety are from my own seed, so I'm really happy about them. And just next to the blackberries there's a little gooseberry bush there. I don't know if you can see on the camera, but it's just starting to get some nice little gooseberries on it now. I'm quite excited about that, because that's a cutting that somebody gave me last year, so that was the first gooseberries I've ever had. There's another cutting for a blackberry bush. Again, put them to climb them up the cage, and the reason you do that is if you leave them on the ground they will start to root, and if you want more blackberry plants that's absolutely fine, but it's just to keep them tidy. And there's another gooseberry plant just here. So that's the back of the allotment. Then we come to my raspberries here. Now these are not as high as they were last year, but there's still plenty of good healthy growth on them, and lots of buds on there as well. So I'm still expecting a great deal of raspberries. If you look at my video that I produced a few months ago showing you how to maintain raspberries, you'll notice that I really thinned out these raspberries and cut out a lot of the dead canes to almost 50% of what was there. So this is not unsurprising this year. I am going to expect to see a good crop of raspberries, but I will expect to see a much greater crop next year, and it's all to do with the way that you maintain and look after the crops. But the main thing is that the raspberries look healthy. So there should be something I should be able to harvest reasonably shortly. And just behind here we have the rhubarb. Now the rhubarb has been amazing. It's all ready to pick. You notice there's a lot of plants here, probably more than most people have probably got, which is 12. And I've already had 2 lots of what you can see now on the picture harvested, and there'll be another lot the same to harvest today or tomorrow. And what I've done with those is cook some rhubarb, orange and ginger crumbles, which I've put in my freezer because they're brilliant for storing, and you can see that on the picture as well. But they're looking really good. So I'll take off the yellow leaves off these. When I'm watering these as well, I always water right into the roots, not on the leaves. Water straight down into the roots, and the water will get directly where it needs to go. So there's still a few picks off this yet, and that's been absolutely brilliant. Here you can see the strawberries. Now these are really slow this year, and I think that's due to the weather. We've had an exceptionally dry April, a very wet May, and a very warm and reasonably dry June. And I think it's the wet May that's caused the problem, because I don't think the bees have been happy to be out and about, and therefore they've not pollinated the strawberry flowers. But they will come, and you can see again, you can see this from a previous video. These smaller ones here are the plants that I took off the runners for this year. The ones next to them are in their last year, because I do a 3-year rotation. So these will produce strawberries for me this year, but these will be dug up at the end of this year, and the space will be used for the runners from the new plants that I'll get in this year. This bed over here, this large bed here, are where most of the strawberries are going to come from this year. They will produce a lot of strawberries, and you'll notice as well that the strawberries are actually starting to produce these runners. You can probably see them on the video. Now it's really important when the strawberries are in fruiting season now that those runners are cut off. You can see that they're actually starting to produce the strawberries. You can see they're developing now, but these runners take energy away from the main plant, so you need to cut them off so that the plant has all the energy it can get, and it's not transferring some of that to the runners. That will mean that you'll get bigger strawberries, and you will get more strawberries if you cut the runners off. Now that's this time of year, but of course later in the year you will leave them on. So when the fruiting is finished, I'll let the runners stay on, and therefore they will produce the plants for next year. Now this is the worst area of my allotment here, which is next to the poly shed, and this is going to be dug over the next few days. I've left this till last on purpose, because this is the area that was used when we constructed the poly house, so it's quite compacted and there's a few weeds in there, but it'll dig up absolutely fine. So once I've turned this over and dug it, I'm going to put my kale and other vegetables in this area, but that's my next job. And you'll see as we go through the allotments, most of the rest of the beds have been dug. There's the poly house, which we'll come back to later. Here's the potatoes, 2 bays or beds of potatoes, and they've been trenched as well. I trenched these about 2 weeks ago, and that was weird as well, because that was quite hard work trenching them, because we had so much rain in May and I couldn't trench them because the ground was too wet. When I did eventually come to trench them, the rain had compacted the ground, so I had to use a 3-prong cultivator to loosen up in between the potato plants so that I could get the soil fine enough to rake over and trench. But they're looking really good, and as you know from the video that I produced on planting potatoes, these potatoes are all Desiree. Now this is where I can proudly say that these plants I'm going to show you now have come from growing in the poly house. We have courgettes, 5 of them, and you can see the yellow leaves there on some of them, and that's natural when you first transplant. So I'll take those leaves off, but and keep them well watered. They will transplant really well. And then there's 1 cucumber here, and the reason the cucumber is here is because it was in my tray of courgettes, and without really noticing I just planted it and put it in, and then realised actually it should have been in the other area, but now I've got it, I will leave it. The cucumbers are a variety called Market More 76. I've grown them for about 4 or 5 years, and they always produce a great crop. I've also got parsnips in here in between the courgettes, and I had to transplant them because well, I'm learning as I go along really, because when I had them in the poly house, because it was so warm, it was actually starting to scorch the leaves. I had them in pods, so I've just put them out, and they seem to be surviving. So I'm going to put a bit more water on them. I dug the ground really well. I mean, you have to with things like parsnips, because they're a downward growing root vegetable. You need to make sure the ground is as fine as possible without as many stones. That will start to impact on the parsnips themselves. So they're quite small at the moment, and I've got some more at home growing in the potting shed. Just behind them you can see my butternut squash, and I transplanted them a few days ago as well, so they need a bit of a water, but they'll be fine. And beyond them you will see celery. Now I've got celery also in the poly house, but I'm really happy with the celery because it's the first time I've grown celery and it's been very, very successful. So as long as they get plenty of water, the celery will be okay. And the good thing about celery is they don't require an awful lot of protection. Over here we have the mangetout. You can see how that's growing. This is the mangetout that I started in the plastic gutter, and if you look at the previous video on the channel, it shows you how I started it and then transplanted them in the ground. Look how they've taken. Fantastic. The good thing about mangetout or climbing peas or beans or anything is once they start growing, they find their own way up the support. So they should grow to about halfway up that metal support. Let me just move around this metal support and show you what's in here. These are my French beans, which again started in the poly house. So they are growing really well. They will find their way up the support. And just at the end there's one sunflower that a allotmenteer Andy gave me, so I'm growing that up there so I can support it up the cage. So there's a lot going on in this bed here, which is all planted and growing nicely. Then we come over to here, and I did these a few days ago. These are the rest of the cucumbers. This Market More 76 variety. You can see them. I always grow them up canes as well, because when these start to grow, they really take off and they produce shoots all over the place. And to keep the cucumbers off the ground, I just grow them up canes. So I'll add more canes when they start to throw out the extra growth and support them. But they're fantastic variety. If you've never tried Market More 76, give that a go. Then we have the first of the Sweetcorn, and these again were started in the poly house. These are a variety called Incredible F1. Grew them last year. Fantastic, really good. I have got another batch which I've just started in the poly house. So they're great. I mean, you want to plant them about 18 inches to 24 inches. That's 1.5 foot to 2 feet apart. Give them plenty of space and plenty of water. After I finish this video, actually, I'm going to give the whole allotment a really good water. On to the next bed, we have the garlic, and that'll be ready for the harvesting soon. I've got no idea what. In fact, that should be ready for harvesting very soon. So I'll do a video and show you when I've dug that up. I'll say I've got no idea how successful that's going to be because I've not grown garlic like this before. It's garlic I bought from the greengrocers. It's not a bulb that I bought from a seed merchant. And I know there's different stories about whether that's the right thing to do or not. Well, we'll find out in a week or two's time when I dig them up. And I'll let you know. And then we've got some onion here. These are all onion sets here. Some of those have started to bolt a little bit, so they've started to have the little bulbs on top, so I need to deal with those. I'll probably dig them up because once they get the bulbs they won't grow any further. But that's one of the downfalls of growing onion sets. In the wrong conditions they will start to bolt. But again, as you can see, I've got more onions here, so I'm not worried. I've got plenty of onions for whatever I need. So these are a later sowing, you can see just here, of onion sets. And here transplanted them from the polyhouse last weekend. These are spinach. Give them a bit of protection. Doesn't necessarily have to give spinach too much protection, but there's a little bit of green netting on there just to get them started. And over here, dug this last night here. I've got a little bit more digging to do on this area over here, and this is where I'm going to plant my Swedes over the weekend. Here are the beetroot, and again these were started in the poly house. These are a variety called Rhubarb, which is a thinner type of beetroot, and I grew them last year and they're really nice beetroot. So I've got another sowing of those in the poly house. And then under the green netting we have some cabbage, and that the first 2 rows are cabbage, and then beyond that the other next 2 rows are Brussels sprouts, and they're growing really nicely. Now with brassicas like this you do need to net them because everything seems to like brassicas. So this type of scaffold netting you can see here doesn't really allow too much in. If you don't, you'll have things like pigeons and butterflies and all sorts of things will just eat them. So if you are going to put netting on things like your brassicas like this, then make sure it's this type of netting. And just over here we have a few empty beds at the moment. This is going to be my sand pit for my grandsons over here, which I've still got to dig out and get more sand. This one here I'm probably going to put things like carrots and some spring onions in, and this is my herb bed, which at the moment I think is temporary. I've got some lemon balm, chives which have got flowers on them, bit of sage and some rosemary, but I'm thinking of doing a herb bed at the right hand side of the poly house. So that's the outside. I'll just to have a look at my compost while you're here. I've been just throwing everything into the compost. It's building up quite nicely. Grass cuttings, old leaves, vegetable cuttings. There's a video on the channel showing you how to start a compost heap, so have a look at that, because I mean, producing your own compost could save you an awful lot of money, and it's really good for your vegetables and your fruit. So you scan across the allotment before I take you into the poly house. You can see the size and the scale of it and everything we've just looked at, and everything growing really well and really nice. It just needs a good water. So let's go into the poly house. Again, you've probably seen a video from a few months ago about how this was built. Timber frame and polythene. So there's a video if you want to know how to build this type of structure, then have a look at that video. But what I will say to you, if you've got a poly house of any size, a polytunnel, they are absolutely amazing. They really are. They make such a difference. So as we come in here, still working on this, by the way, I've had to focus. I'm still working on the roof to give it more support, but this time of year I've had to focus on the planting, so I'll go back to that in a month or two's time. So let's take you around what's going on in here. So let's start off on the shelves. This is all obviously things that will be ready to plant in the ground at some point. I am thinking about succession planning now that I've got the poly house, basically trying to make the allotment as productive as possible for as long as possible, which means that when a crop finishes, have I got something else to put in its place. I'm still learning as I go along. I'm going to do a video on that. Here you can see my next batch of spring onions, which will be ready to plant. I'm going to put them in the ground in here actually. Over there, looking great, aren't they? Look really healthy. I can't remember what variety they are. I don't know if I wrote it on. Oh, white Lisbon. Oh, they're a great variety. Yeah, excellent. White Lisbon. So they're, if you're not growing them, definitely grow white Lisbons. And behind them, these are all little gem lettuce. And you think there's a lot of lettuce there, isn't there? And I think that as well when I look at it actually. But I'll be planting them outside and some in here over the next week or so. Here you can see I've got another gutter, which I planted some more mangetout, similar to the mangetout that would have been on the previous video. Now these have been disappointing this year, the peppers. I've got no idea why they're so slow. They've got a bit of sort of yellowy sort of leaves on some of them as well, but I'm hoping that they will start to take off a little bit now the temperature's gotten much warmer in here. Behind here are just seeds I planted a few days ago. Onions, spinach, coriander, leeks, see sweetcorn at the back in the polystyrene trays, a few more sowings of beetroot, more lettuce, and what's the other one, and more spring onions in that last tray. And some of this is experimental, you know, because I look at the seeds packets and it says you should plant some of these varieties earlier, but I thought, do you know what, put them in, see how they grow, and then I'm going to try them inside in the polytunnel rather than put them outside, see if they last any longer. Now behind them, these nice healthy tall plants here, these are Swedes, and I'm going to put them out on Saturday outside into that area that I showed you. And here we have kale, that'll also go outside. Beyond there, there's some excess tomatoes, because I've already put the tomatoes in. I've got no idea what I'm going to do with them. I'm either going to have to water them heavily and put them in bigger pots, or try and find a place outside for them. So when we come over to what's planted in the ground, you'll notice that I've put the tomatoes in the ground and they're growing really well. But because of the shelving that I've done as well, which is movable, when all these seed trays are taken off, the shelves will lift off, and I've got tomatoes under here as well. So by the time they need to be supported, the shelves will be off, and I'll put canes up to support them. So I'm going to get a load of tomatoes this year. Most of these are a variety called Moneymaker, which is a really common and popular variety. A few more lettuce here, which I've already. These are a variety called Lakeland, and they're looking good, and they are the really lovely, fresh, crispy lettuce. I've got more of them over here as well. So these are ready to pick now. So they'll be taken home, harvested and shared and obviously the little gem then will go in their place. There's a little rogue mangetout plant there as well, which is where the guttering was when I first planted them. Next to them I've got my spring onions, and you can see that they're growing really well as well. And then I've got another batch of celery here. So I'm going to give all this a bit water in a minute. And just behind these tomatoes over here, these, believe it or not, are raspberry plants. And I took them out of the ground, put them in pots, and I'm going to water them. So I'm going to give them away because I don't really have the space for them with my other raspberries, but I didn't want to waste them, so I'll give them more water and give them to whoever wants them. Just behind at the end over here, there's 2 blueberry bushes, just 2 in the corner here, and a new one that I got this year, which is here. So I've got to be honest, I'm absolutely chuffed to bits with the poly house. I think it's amazing. It's really made such a difference. Really pleased with it, and I'm only really going to see its full potential next year, because I started the build March, April time. It was really at the time when I should have been digging and preparing the allotment. So of course that came and went, so I had to focus on getting the allotment dug and prepared and ready for all the crops, and I was able to do less than I wanted to do in the poly house. However, I'm not going to complain this year because I think there's plenty going on. So as you can see, loads of amazing stuff going on in the allotment. So I hope you've enjoyed that tour as much as I have. I'm going around and I'm looking at things, and even myself, who's planting and growing these things, even I'm surprised at some of the things that I'm looking at, and the growth and things like that, which is that's the beauty of having an allotment or a garden and growing vegetables and fruit. It really is. It's an absolute pleasure. So if you do like the video, then don't forget to give it the thumbs up, and if you want to subscribe to the channel for future videos, how to sow and grow fruit and veg, and a few recipe ideas, then please subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know how you're getting on in your allotments or your garden, about what's growing well for you. Are your strawberries behind like mine? Because I've really not sort of known the strawberries be as late as this for quite a number of years. I think it's related to the weather. Are there other things that you're growing in your allotment that maybe I'm not? Have you got any ideas of things that you think I could grow in my poly house? Put them in the comments below, and I will make sure that I'll respond. So hopefully I'll see you soon on the next video.